Yeah, once again, welcome to Bio 211D Plant Physiology, Unit 4, Session 4, the carbon cycle. And by the close of this session, you should be able to state the sources of carbon in the biosphere, list carbon sinks, describe the carbon cycle, explain how capture and conversion into complex organic molecules, and describe human activities that release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So the carbon cycle is the series of processes by which carbon compounds are interconverted in the environment, involving the incorporation of carbon dioxide into living tissue by photosynthesis and its return to the atmosphere through respiration, the decay of dead organisms, and the burning of first fossil fuels. Carbon is present throughout the natural environment in a fixed amount. It takes many forms and moves through the environment via the carbon cycle. So basically, the carbon cycle is the circulation and transformation of carbon back and forth between living organisms and the environment. Carbon is an element, something that cannot be broken down into a simpler substance as we have seen in chemistry. Carbon compounds are present in living organisms like plants and animals, and in non-living things like rocks and soil. So carbon compounds can exist as solids, example diamonds and coal, liquids such as crude oil or gases, carbon dioxide. So carbon is often referred to as the building block of life because living organisms are based on carbon and carbon compounds. Please know that the bodies of all living organisms are composed mainly of carbon compounds. The amount of carbon on the Earth and in the Earth's atmosphere is fixed. However, that fixed amount of carbon is dynamic, always changing into different carbon compounds and moving between living and non-living things. Carbon is released to the atmosphere from what are called carbon sources and stored in plants, animals, rocks, and water in what are called carbon sinks. This process occurs in a number of steps. In the first step, through photosynthesis, plants take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and release oxygen. The carbon dioxide is converted back into carbon compounds that make up the body of the plant, which are stored in the above ground parts such as shoots, leaves, as well as in the below ground parts, that's the root. In the second step, animals eat the plants, breathe in the oxygen, and exhale carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide exhaled by animals is then available for plants to use in photosynthesis. The carbon stored in plants that is not eaten by animals eventually decomposes after the plants die. The carbon released from decomposition is either released into the atmosphere or stored in the soil. Other processes can also release large quantities of carbon into the atmosphere. These include geologic processes like volcanic eruptions and other natural changes that destabilize carbon sinks. For example, increasing temperatures can cause carbon dioxide to be released from the ocean into the atmosphere. One important aspect of the carbon cycle is the speed with which carbon moves from a carbon source to a carbon sink and then back again. Some living organisms grow and decompose more quickly than others. For example, living organisms with shells like oysters or snails take a long time to decompose than watermelons, pumpkins, and tomatoes, which are softer. Human beings and other animals also decompose faster than trees, but because humans are usually buried, it takes a long time for their carbon to be released into the atmosphere. The rate of decomposition and the resulting release of carbon can be hastened by the actions of specialized microscopic and macroscopic plants and animals. Fungi and bacteria referred to as decomposers. Decomposers break down dead organic matter of plants and animals, releasing nutrients into the environment. The decomposition process ends up creating carbon dioxide and other gases such as methane. Plant and animal growth and decomposition occur simultaneously all the time. For instance, we see live trees grow and leaf litter and felled or fallen trees rotting in the same forest at the same time. A portion of the total amount of carbon present on the Earth runs through the carbon cycle relatively quickly. undergoing changes from atmospheric carbon dioxide to plant and animal matter and back into atmospheric carbon dioxide within hundreds of years. Another portion of the carbon is caught up in long-lived and stable carbon sinks. These stable sinks include subsurface hydrocarbon reservoirs from which oil and gas are produced, as well as coal formations. Since the start of the industrial age, humans have harvested and burned coal, oil and gas deposits for energy, releasing the carbon compounds that were stored in the coal, oil and gas deposit back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide and other gases. Ghana is also a beneficiary of such deposits as discovered in the deep sea oil fields in the western region. These days, large amounts of carbon compounds are being released into the atmosphere as a result of human activity, much faster than they would have been released naturally. This rapid release is the main cause of the currently observed anthropogenic global warming. The various components of the carbon cycle are discussed in detail in subsequent sections of this session. So you have what actually goes on in the atmosphere. You have carbon dioxide, you have photosynthesis occurring, and there is decay, dead organisms and waste products, you have fossil fuels, and it's cycling that brings about the carbon cycle. So the carbon cycle, you have photosynthesis, is a complex series of reactions carried out by algae, phytoplankton, and the leaves in plants, which utilize the energy from the sun. You have already studied photosynthesis in Unit 1. So photosynthesis utilizes carbon dioxide molecules from the air and water molecules and absorbs the energy from the sun to produce a simple sugar and oxygen molecules as a byproduct. So the simple sugars are then converted into other molecules such as starch, fats, proteins, enzymes, and DNA or RNA. That is, all of the other molecules in living plants are synthesized from glucose. In other words, all matter of a plant ultimately is produced as a result of this photosynthesis reaction. Note that during photosynthesis, plants use carbon dioxide and produce oxygen, and all other organisms use the oxygen for cellular respiration. Combustion occurs when any organic material is reacted with oxygen or burned in the presence of oxygen to give off the products of carbon dioxide and water and energy in the form of heat. The organic material can be any fossil fuel such as natural gas, oil or coal. Other organic materials that combust are wood, paper, plastics, and cloth. Note that organic materials contain at least carbon and hydrogen and may include oxygen. If other elements are present, they also ultimately combine with oxygen to form a variety of pollutant molecules such as sulfur oxides and nitrogen oxide. Metabolism occurs in living organisms such as animals and humans after the ingestion of organic plant or animal food, as we have discussed in section 1 of this unit. As discussed in respiration, a series of complex reactions occurs with oxygen in living cells to convert, for example, sugar, lipids, and proteins into the products of carbon dioxide and water and energy. So this reaction is also carried out by bacteria in the decomposition or decay of waste materials on land and in the water. During both combustion and metabolism, oxygen is used and carbon dioxide is a byproduct. The whole purpose of both processes is to convert chemical energy into other forms of energy, such as heat. However, metabolism is a controlled process where ATP is produced as the energy currency unit of the cell, unlike combustion in which the energy is wasted often as heat. Carbon dioxide is slightly soluble and is absorbed into bodies of water, such as the oceans and lakes. Carbon dioxide is not very soluble, as can be observed by what happens when a bottle or can of carbonated drink, such as Coke, is opened. If not opened with care, most of it spills out because the carbon dioxide in it forces out since it is only slightly soluble in water. However, some of the dissolved carbon dioxide remains in the water. Warmer the water bodies contain less carbon dioxide than colder water, since they gain heat energy from the water to escape. Do you know why carbonated drinks must be self-chilled when drinking? Some carbon dioxide is used by algae and phytoplankton through the process of photosynthesis. In some marine ecosystems, some organisms such as corals and those with shells take up carbon dioxide from the water and convert it into calcium carbonate. All these shelled organisms die. Bits and pieces of the shells fall to the bottom of the oceans and accumulate as sediments. The carbonate sediments are constantly being formed and redissolved in the depths of the oceans. It is thought that over long periods of time, the sediments are raised up as dry land or into mountains. This type of sedimentary rock is called limestone. The carbonates can then redissolve, releasing carbon dioxide back to the air or water. In the natural carbon cycle, there are two main processes which occur. These are photosynthesis and metabolism. During photosynthesis, plants use carbon dioxide and produce oxygen as stated earlier. During metabolism, oxygen is used and carbon dioxide is a byproduct, as we saw in respiration. We have all seen bush being burned, smoke released by cars on our roads, in our cities. These are some of the human activities that contribute to the carbon cycle. Thus, as human beings, we impact the carbon cycle during the combustion of any type of fossil fuel, which may include oil, coal, or natural gas, as well as the burning of plant material or any organic or plastic material. So fossil fuels were formed very long ago from plant or animal remains that were buried, compressed, and transformed into oil, coal, or natural gas. This type of carbon is said to be fixed and in place, and is in effect locked out of the natural carbon cycle. Humans intervene by burning the fossil fuels. During combustion, in the presence of oxygen, carbon dioxide and water molecules are released into the atmosphere. Similarly, when we burn the bush, we do the same. The question then is, what happens to this extra carbon dioxide that is released into the atmosphere? The extra carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere then causes what is referred to as greenhouse effect, which may then result in global warming, and for that matter, climate change. The sources of carbon in the biosphere were shown whilst we looked at carbon sinks or reserves. The interplay of use and reuse of carbon in the carbon cycle was also discussed. How plants capture and fix carbon dioxide into organic molecules, and the impact of human activities in the pollution of the atmosphere with excess carbon dioxide was also discussed.